So far, we have been looking at various data structures and data types in Python. Now, in this lecture, we will look at decision statements. When a decision statement will be required. Whenever there is need to be two different operations that needs to be performed based on a particular value data type, then there will be decision statements. So, what are the decision statements available in Python? There are three different keywords using which we can create decision-making statements. Those are if, elif, and else. So in this example, I have to make use of this particular variable number, and using that number variable, I need to decide certain operations if it is positive and certain operations if it is negative. So with this decision of whether number is positive or negative, I need to carry out two different separate actions. For that, I am creating a variable num equal to assigning a fixed value of minus 3.4. When this program executes, this first decision it checks if the number is greater than 0. If this number is positive, then whatever statements that are present inside this if condition, that gets executed. So when I mean by inside if condition, Python does not support like opening and closing of braces to mean a block of statement. So if you have looked at other languages, in most of the languages, to define a particular block of statement, meaning group of statements together, we usually used to follow an approach of like this. Like we used to open and close brackets. Whatever statements are present inside this brackets, those will be called as one single block. But Python does not support this kind of opening and closing of brackets. It follows a different kind of method. So that kind of method is called as indentation. We call it as indentation. So what exactly means by indentation is to represent a particular set of lines as one single block. All lines has to begin at a specific column number. Say this column number is at, if you could read at the bottom of the editor or the IDE window, it shows the column number as 5. So if I can change, it shows the column number as 5 here. So if all the statements starts at 5th column, then those statements are going to be treated as one single block inside this if condition. So this indentation matters. The indentation space is the minimum requirement is one space, and maximum it can be any number of spaces. Even if it is going to be one space from the starting position of this if keyword. Say my first line starts with an indentation of this much quantity, then all the remaining lines has to start at the same column value only. So what are the lines, block of statements present inside this if condition? These two print statements are present inside my if condition. So the same applies for the next block. So there is another keyword called as elif. This elif is going to check another condition. So it is read as else if. If you split it up and read, it stands for else if. So after if, there is an else if condition. So when the statements inside this else if will get executed is, if at all the first condition fails. If this condition fails, then this condition will be checked for. If this condition is true, suppose. So we would have seen the Boolean variables, right? The Boolean data type you would have seen, it can hold value of either true or false. So in this case, if this condition results in a variable false, then the statements present inside this will not get executed. It will check the next condition. If this statement results in a true value, then all statements present inside this particular block will get executed. If assume this statement has failed as well. If this statement has failed as well, then the next block in this sequence will be checked. So even I can keep on adding multiple elif blocks endlessly. There is no limit to that. Okay. So to terminate the else if condition, the last elif block, it will count it as the end of if else statement. And there is another keyword called as else keyword. This is an optional keyword. So why this optional keyword we can use is if all the conditional checks have failed, if all the decision making statements If elif, whatever number of elif conditions has occurred before, everything has failed, then by default it will come inside this else condition and then it will execute. Okay. So here also I can have multiple number of statements present here. It's not just print statement. I have given it only for an example. Even if I am going to assign or add multiple values, whatever statements I want, I can keep it inside here. So for example, I have kept print statement. So let me execute these statements and see what is the result it is producing. To execute all these statements, I can select all, right click on the selected portion, go to execute selection in Python console. So it prints the value negative number, it's the text negative number. So how is this resulting? Is because the value we have is negative, the first condition number greater than 0, it failed, it's a positive number equal to 0, this condition also failed, then by default it has resulted into this particular statement called as negative number. Okay, so this is one example for an if-else condition. But there are other types of if-else condition we can create. This is called as multiple if-else statements. Because there is no one single if statement, there are multiple conditions being checked. So this is called as multiple if-else statement. Even one single block, only these 3 lines if we have in our code, that is also valid. Okay. So remaining are optional only. So based on our need, we will be writing all these if-else statements. So what is the other type of statements? If multiple if-else is one type, what is the other type? The other type is called as nested if-else. Okay, so that we will call it as nested if-else statements. In nested if-else statements, I can have n number of if-else conditions inside some other if block or else block. So I can keep these kind of statements inside other statements. So even if you see here, there is indentation followed for the same approach. So if is the first conditional block, and after this if, there comes the else statement. Okay, so this else is corresponding to this particular if statement, and followed by that there is an indentation. So which tells all the statements starting from this particular column number are going to be present inside this if condition. So there is a space indentation, after that the if statements gets created, if condition is declared here. And again, for this if keyword, it needs to encompass some certain number of code. So what we are doing is, there is further indentation to this particular line, this particular column position, there is further indentation created, and there is another statement, whatever we want to write it there, we have written. So in this case, we are checking the value number is equal to 0 and printing the value as 0, printing the text value as 0 here. So there is another if condition for this particular if statement. The corresponding else again starts at the same column. Okay, so here it is a corresponding value. For if there is if, else statement has to be for some if statement. That is why both has to be at the same column, and the remaining statements should be indented further inside. Okay, so if you see here again, the indentation is reduced because this else is for this corresponding if. So this is how a nested if else statement is created here. So basically what we are checking is, we are assigning a value to number. So this particular input is called as, there is a, I'll break down this particular line. Here if you take, there is a function called as input. Okay, yeah, I'm just cutting it and pasting it again. There is a function called as input. What this function does is, it gets a user input from the console window. So when I execute this particular line, say to execute this, we clear the console here for time being. You can right click and click on clear all, so we get clear. And when I execute this particular line and assign it to a variable, so in this case I will assign it to a number. So when I execute this line, so I will select it, I use the keyboard shortcut to execute. Here it will ask me a value. Say suppose I am entering value 8 and then enter. What will happen is, my value of 8 is stored into this particular variable. So the number variable has got created. If you can see the value in this variable explorer window. This is called the variable explorer window. Here you can see this. What we can observe is this number variable has stored a value of 8 in string data type, because by default whatever value you get through this input keyword, that will be stored as a string data type. But a string data type cannot be compared with another number in this if condition. Only value of same data type can be compared in any if condition. So for that purpose, again what we are doing, we are converting our value into a float value. Okay, so we would have seen in data types as a numeric data type. In numeric data type, float value comes into picture. So a numeric data type can be of two types. Okay, so it can be of only two types, either integer or float. Okay, integer stores whole numbers and float stores decimal values. So I'm converting this into a decimal value with the help of after fetching the input, there will be a string. The string data type is being converted into a float, and then that is stored in the number variable. So now let's compare the number variable here. So first, the number variable, if it is greater than or equal to 0, this is true, the condition will get in. If this number is equal to 0, then it will print as 0, else it will say it's a positive number. And if at all the first time the condition itself has failed, then it will directly come into this else statement. In this else statement, it will print it is a negative value. So let me give an input. So I am selecting all these lines, right click, execute selection in Python console. Now it is asking me for a value. I'm entering -6 and enter. So it gives me the output. It is negative number in the console window. Okay. So there will be some assignments below the video. Try it out, check it out, and then post your discussions. See you in the next video lesson.